Okay, hi guys. So welcome to Building Science and Services 2. So this is your tutorial 7, Fuel Gas System Part 1. So there will be a few questions in this. So let's get on with the explanation for it. Okay, so for the first question is asking you to name the type of fuel gas that is commonly used in building. So we have the natural gas and the liquefied petroleum gas. So natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas, both of these gas, the function is for you to use for cooking lah. So which you will see on this picture here. So please ignore this picture. So what you are getting at this Petronas and what you're using in the car is gasoline. So this is the wrong thing to be put here lah. So just for your info lah. So the natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas in Malaysia, the usage is for you to cook, which is in this gas tanki lah. Okay, so for the second question, is asking you to explain the reason of natural gas or why they have been gaining the ground over petroleum in recent years. So we have our LPG and our natural gas as of the first question, which is question 1, which we use for cooking. So why is natural gas preferred over petroleum? It's because natural gas burn cleaner and emit lower level of potentially harmful byproduct into the air. And then natural gas is combustible, and when burned, give off a great deal of energy, which is about the same with the LPG. And then natural gas is lighter than air and easily dispersed if there's a gas leak. So this is one of the main advantages natural gas have over LPG. So LPG is actually heavier than air. So in an event that gas leak, then if you were to breathe it in and if the LPG is leaking in a room which do not have any ventilation, then if you were to go in, you will actually die due to breathing in the chemical lah. So natural gas have the advantage of being easier to disperse. If there's a ventilation and opening, they can easily be ventilated and dispersed out into the air. Okay, so the last is natural gas is one of the cleanest, safest, and most useful of all energy sources. So out of all the energy source we had, we found that natural gas is actually one of the cleanest and safest to be used. Okay, so on to the next question. So in Malaysia, LPG and NG are generally the two types of gas energy supplied to consumer. So with the aid of diagram, discuss the concept of how LPG and NG supplied to the consumer. So there's two methods of how the LPG and NG is being supplied. For LPG, they can only be contained in a local area. For condominium, we actually store it in a compound, which is in a cylinder in such a form. So when they are stored in a compound in a cylinder in such a form, they are actually called a manifold system. So this is a manifold system. And then another method of storing them is called a bulk tank system, which is this picture. So they are stored in a big tank, and then it can be either above ground or underground. So when they are stored in this container, they are connected via pipeline to the supplier lah. So how we can get the supply of this LPG is through a pipeline. So one thing to note about LPG, which is a liquid petroleum gas. So the thing about LPG is that we use it in a form of gas, but because we do not want to have a very big storage to store the gas, that's why we pressurize the gas into a liquid. So essentially, we are storing the gas in liquid form for more efficient space. And then when we are to use this LPG by releasing the pressure, is essentially converting itself from liquid to gas. So we are using gas to use for our usage, either for cooking or for heating up our building. Which this one for heating up the building as a heater is what cold country will have in which Malaysia won't have it. So for LPG, if, in Malaysia or NG, LPG and NG both, the usage in Malaysia is mostly used for cooking. Okay, so this is the LPG supply concept, the diagram for it. So we have our storage vessel, then they have to pass by two regulator. So what this regulator do is they lower down the pressure of the liquid petroleum gas. So they lower down the pressure from the first regulator from either 120 or 80 psi to 10 to 2 psi. So when it goes down close to consumer at a very low pressure, then you will pass by a meter in which the meter is there to read how much gas you have consumed. Okay, so question 3. In Malaysia, the LPG and natural gas are generally the two types of gas supply to consumer. So with the aid of diagram, discuss the concept of how LPG and NG supply to consumer. Okay, so the concept is the natural gas is conveyed through PGU pipeline. So this is owned by Petronas, and then they are distributed throughout Peninsular Malaysia after being processed in the gas processing plant. So once they leave the PGU pipeline, the natural gas will convey and be distributed through pipe gas distribution system to supplier or businesses and home. So basically, NG is being produced by Petronas. So they have pipeline installed which will transport the natural gas from their processing plant to home and business owner. So this is a figure of how the layout of the natural gas pipeline in Malaysia. Okay, so this is a flowchart of how the natural gas is being distributed. So we have our processing plant, treatment plant. This one is where the natural gas is being mined offshore. In Malaysia, our natural gas, our petroleum is all out in the sea near to Sabah Sarawak coast. So once they are being drilled and obtained, then they will be sent to the treatment plant. Then once it is sent from the treatment plant and being processed, then it will be transported via pipeline to the city gate station. So do note that from the treatment plant to the city gate is at a very high pressure, and then from the city gate to the regulator it will be at a lower pressure, and then as it passes by different stages, the pressure will get lower and lower. So once it gets to the gas meter, then the gas pressure will be at its lowest for consumption purposes. Okay, so this is another diagram of the natural gas supply concept. As before, we have our city gate, and then there's an additional stage. This is a more detailed supply concept. There's an odorization station, and then a district station, and then to either service station, area station, regulating station, service station. So this is all different port in place to add on and reduce the pressure. Except for this odorization station, in which is to put in the sulfur into the natural gas so that we are able to detect for any leakage. So at the end, that will be our consumer for consumer or for the industrial usage. Then we will have our meter before entering our house. Okay, so for question 4, name and explain the two types of fuel gas system installation. So as the previous question have already covered, one of the method of fuel gas system installation is the bulk gas storage. So essentially it's like a boiler. So this is either for LPG or natural gas. Both of them can be stored in this container. So this container is built to withstand very, very high pressure. So when the gas is being put into this tank, they will be in a high pressure to compress the gas to become liquid. So it can be above ground or underground. So the next is the manifold gas system. So it's in a standard portable cylinder, and then is installed in groups of two. So usually a portable cylinder is used in a condo lah. There will be a compound for it, and then it's usually used in a condo. Okay, so for question 5 is to explain the function of gas pressure regulator and operation of three main elements. So the purpose of a gas pressure regulator is to maintain a constant downstream gas pressure by reducing the upstream or inlet pressure to a desired downstream pressure. So within the operating range of the regulator, it will maintain that downstream pressure regardless of changes in the gas flow and changes in the upstream pressure condition. So doesn't matter how high or how low the supply gas flow becomes, this regulator, gas pressure regulator in place is to ensure that there's a constant low pressure of gas being supplied downstream to the supplier. So this is the idea of the why we need to install a gas pressure regulator for the consumer. So the necessary gas pressure supplied to the consumer will be very, very low compared to what is being supplied by the supplier. So it doesn't matter if the gas pressure increase or decrease, this gas pressure regulator in place will ensure that the consumer will be obtaining a constant flow of gas. Okay, so there are three main elements. So these three main elements works hand in hand to ensure that the consumer is getting a constant upflow of the gas. So the loading element is a spring, and then it will adjust itself according to how much pressure is being forced onto this spring. And then we have our measuring element. So this is a neoprene diaphragm. So it measures the changes in the downstream condition and respond to position the valve to a position which counteract the changes and return the downstream pressure to its original level. And then the last is the restricting element, which is the valve. So it increase or decrease the downstream pressure by either close down or open up the valve. So all these elements have to be in place in order to ensure that the consumer is having a constant flow of gas. So this is the eight of diagram for the gas pressure regulator. So we have our loading element, which is a spring up here. Then we have our measuring element, which is the diaphragm, and then the restricting element, which is the valve. So depending on the pressure, depending on the supply pressure, these three elements will work hand in hand to ensure that the outlet pressure is constant. So this is the last question. So it's to explain the importance of gas odorizing. So the reason why natural gas or all fuel gas have to be odorized is because when the fuel gas in their natural state are odorless, which means you will not be able to smell them. So before they are being supplied to the customer, they must be odorized so that any leaking gas may be detected by odor before gas concentration in the atmosphere reach level capable of causing fire or explosion. And then all fuel gas supplied to consumer must be odorized so that, okay, so this is the same thing. So natural gas have to be odorized not just because of fire or explosion. So when it reach a critical level, then if you were to breathe in, you will actually be breathing in the chemical. So instead of taking in oxygen, if you were to take this chemical in, you will faint lah. So there's a hazard of that, and then there's also a hazard of fire or explosion lah. So just a spark because of explosion, and then people will die. So that's why all gases have to be odorized. So this odorization mostly is putting in sulfur at a very low level, which is considered harmless for human. Okay, so that's about it for tutorial 7. Hope you guys understand.